Well, lesson 71, and we're not quite finished with the Crusades. I bet you were thinking, oh, I hope we're finished. There's a few more that I need to go over, and they're in your book. Not that you need to know a lot about this. Remember I said you need to know about the First Crusade and being how it began. And then the Third Crusade was the most famous crusade because of the people, the leaders that were in it. And we find, King Richard the Lionheart and also King Philip. So that being said, the Third Crusade didn't end so well. But we come on to the Fourth Crusade. And this crusade was actually the worst. It was actually pretty terrible. If I had to rate the crusades, I would say the Fourth Crusade was that crusade that you'd be totally embarrassed by. Why? Well, in 1198, Pope Innocent III announces this new crusade. And he is not the most innocent of people, I could tell you that. So he decides to use the crusade for other things. He said, well, I got the Crusaders to come. We got the Crusaders to come. I can get them to come anytime, because I'm the Pope, right? So he ends up kind of using the Crusaders for hire. Not a good thing. So what happens back then? He orders this crusade thinking that it's against the Muslims, but really it's not. So the French, remember I told you the French were the main crusaders, they decided to come in to Italy. Italy is where Rome is. The Venetians were there, were Venice. So we're talking about Venice. Venice was becoming very wealthy because they were shipbuilders, and they had to build all these ships so the crusaders could get to Jerusalem. And so crusaders that were there, they came, and the shipbuilders built all these, and the French said, we want so many ships to go ahead and build them. But when the French crusaders came, there was only 1/3 of them. So they had built all these ships for nothing. But the French basically said, okay, we're going to take those ships that you built, at least 1/3 of them, but we don't have no money. We don't have the money. So how would they pay them? They said, well, after the crusade, we'll get a lot of treasures from where we're going, and we'll come back and we'll pay you. Not really sure that would happen. So the Crusaders go in, and the Pope has them attack this city called Zador of Croatia. The problem is, it's a Christian stronghold, Byzantine. It's not even Muslim. And they end up ransacking a Christian city. How terrible is that? And the Pope takes the riches from the city. See, the Pope is really secretly not really wanting to fight against the Muslims and Islam, but he wants to fight against the Byzantine Orthodox Empire in Constantinople. The Pope is thinking, I'm going to use the Crusaders to go in and take over Constantinople and that Christian part of the world so that he can rule it. That's what this crusade was about. So the Pope secretly owned this Venetian company, and so as taking over Constantinople, he would send these French knights to Constantinople, as he did. The thing is that he had this secret spy, this prince in Constantinople. His name was Alexis. And Alexis, he supported the Pope, and Alexis wanted to be the king. He was the prince and not the king. And so he wanted to take over. And he said, if you get me to take over, I will support the Pope, and I'll bring the whole church under you instead of under the Orthodox Church. So the Pope says, okay, so he's sending in a crusade into Constantinople. And so he asks the Crusaders to help him dispose the reigning king so that Alexis, the prince, could reign instead. And it happens. So they take over Constantinople, and Alexis does become emperor, but only for a short time. Because as soon as the Crusaders left, you see, the people in Constantinople decided they did not like Crusaders anymore, that the Crusaders were not going to help them. And so as soon as the Crusaders started leaving, they went and took the kingdom away from Alexis. And so he only reigned for a very short time, and they would not support the Pope. This did nothing to help the Crusader states. It was nothing to do with Jerusalem, nothing to do with anything except for the Pope's big idea to take over the Christian world. So, bad idea. That was a terrible crusade. And plus, a lot of the French knights, they went back, sadly, very poor and very broken. Other crusades. So they had some other crusades, one in 1212 after that. And it was a young boy that encouraged children from the German city of Cologne. Remember, Cologne was the Jewish type city? But he organized these children to go for this crusade. And it tragically ended too, and many children died. It was not a good crusade, you can imagine. In 1213, yes, there was this fifth crusade. Pope Innocent III decided for the Crusaders to attack Egypt. You see, there was a treaty offered to give Jerusalem, some parts of Jerusalem, to the Crusaders. So, but the leaders of the French Crusades, they were all French back in that area, refused the treaty, and they wanted to fight and actually take over Egypt too. Not a good idea. So the Egyptian Muslims, they said, we had a treaty and we were going to let you into Jerusalem and let pilgrims in there and, let you have part of it. And now you want everything. So they attacked the Crusaders, and the army died in the Nile River. Most of the knights ended up in the Nile River. Kind of sad. But this forced the Crusaders to surrender and leave Egypt. And then Frederick II, Emperor of the Holy Empire, led a crusade in 1227 to 1229. And he concluded with the treaty with the Egyptian leader. And so during a time period, 10 years, Christians could go into Bethlehem. They allowed Christians to go into Bethlehem and to go into parts of Jerusalem, even though most of the area was not such a great thing to see anymore because it had been ransacked. But 10 years later, guess what happened? The Muslims reconquered it, and they gave them another treaty with Jerusalem, and they attacked in 1244 and then returned the city to Muslim rule. A lot of battles to do in Jerusalem with these crusades. The end of the crusades. Whew, I bet you're tired of the crusades. Well, I am too. But we need to go through this part of history. Very important. The end of the crusades. Why did the end of the crusades happen? First, there was poor leadership in the Crusader states. They didn't have good leaders. Another, they had constant Muslim attacks because the people of Europe did not really want to live there. But Muslims lived there already. In 1291, Acre, the last crusade stronghold, fell to the Muslims. Acre was the city capital of the Crusader states, and it fell to the Muslims. The Muslims attacked them. The last of the knights, they were going in to defend this area. They went into the midst of this desert part area, and in the midst of the desert, they had no water. The wells had been poisoned again, and they were sick and they were dehydrated. So they had to surrender, finally surrender to the Muslim forces. And they let go of the Crusader states. No more Crusaders. So over 100 years, many lives were lost. And the Crusader knights were coming back to their homes, and they were torn up physically and spiritually, thinking they had gone to fight a war for God. When they came back, they realized that the war was terrible, and they really didn't know what they were fighting for in the long run of it. The good and bad. The good was, yes, it's important to defend when you're being attacked by Muslim terrorists. Yes, we need to defend ourselves, and so did they. And they protected many poor pilgrims, and they started hospitals, and they tried to protect other people going into pilgrimage in Jerusalem. But as I said, what was Jerusalem? Who really owned Jerusalem and Israel? Was it the Muslims? Nah. Was it the Christians? Nah. Was it anyone else? Yeah. You see, that area had been given to Abraham's descendants, had been given to Israel. But many years, in fact, we're talking about the years now, 1,000, 1,200, not until 1948 would Israel come back, would the people of the Jews come back to their promised land. So God was just waiting, wasn't he? So, you know what? The Crusades actually ended up doing a whole lot of nothing in the battles. But it kept Christianity safe in some areas, didn't it? So there was a purpose. You see, Jesus didn't authorize us to do that physical fighting to support his cause. You know that. In fact, he said, "My kingdom is not of this world," in John 18:36. So, going to war. When wars are to protect the innocent, it's a different thing, isn't it? But when wars are to selfishly go in and just conquer for our own needs, that's a different story, isn't it? So let's learn from these Crusades. So my Uncle Pat, way back when, I could give him an answer. You see, religion is not going to get you anywhere. So trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path.